What do you mean?
What do you mean?
What do you mean?
From her What Do You Mean channel.
The revolution will not be televised, but you sure as fuck be able to find it all over the internet. Now, if you're watching one of my videos, and I assume you'd already know this pretty well, but just to be sure, there's a reason. Now, this is aimed at Australians more than anything, but there's a reason Tracy Grimshaw won't be taking a break from going after dodgers, hoons, and shit tradies, landlords and tenants. Like, yeah, there's a reason the chuds on the desk of the project aren't going to be having conversation like, oh, Hong Kong, quarter of their population, huh? And, oh, France is still going. Is because they don't want to give us any ideas. They don't want to put any thoughts in our heads other than, holy shit, one of the royals' kids is going on a play date. Alright, let's get started. And we're going to start with Eye for an Eye. Over 1 million people showing up even in the rain this weekend in Hong Kong for ongoing protests, which started with a extradition bill, which was to allow anyone to be extradited to China. And the people, rightfully so, see it as China trying to have more control over the people of Hong Kong.
The collusion of the police and gangs, organized crimes that will destroy Hong Kong.
You see our government use violence, and the thing is getting worse. When we have the standpoint, we should express ourselves. It is our responsibility.
Well, if you compare what the police throw to us and what we throw to them, you can't compare. How can you compare this kind of aid to, say, like a tear gas? That's totally unbalanced.
They're trying to attack us or trying to just turn a blind eye to us, and it doesn't help. We are just trying to fight for what we already have, what Hong Kong is. We just want Hong Kong to stay Hong Kong. We are not demanding for something else or something extra.
Apparently, people of Hong Kong were given permits to gather in Victoria Square, but there's so many of them, and they all marched to the business district and surrounded government buildings, and take my hat off to them. They're somewhere where they didn't have a permit to be assembling. I think it's like 5 years in prison. Alright, moving on. Now, definitely appreciate the stressful situation Kashmir is in, being in between and the centre of two nuclear armed nations. Now, I try to pay attention to what's going on everywhere, but it makes it a little bit harder when the people there don't even have an idea of what's going on at the moment.
This is what much of Srinagar has looked like for nearly 2 weeks. Kashmiris unable to move around the largest city in the region, and communications completely shut down. Indian administrators say some phone lines in the Kashmir Valley were reconnected on Saturday, with more due on Sunday.
We have also opened up mobile internet with some functionality in at least 5 districts, and shall be successively and in a calibrated manner opening up other areas as well.
Phone users in Srinagar had varied reactions.
Everything paralyzed here in Kashmir. Everything is paralyzed.
I think it's a good thing that the government is able to restore the phone lines, because people were facing a lot of issues. They were not able to communicate with their near and dear ones.
But for some, the worst restriction is on freedom of movement. Sheikh Zahid has been teaching his niece and nephew at home since the shutdown began. He says not being able to move around has been severe.
Overall, there is still a lot of problems here. The kids are stuck inside. Their schools have been shut. In 30-35 years, I haven't seen restrictions so bad. My sister is only 2 kilometers away, and I don't know her situation.
Despite the promise of the lockdown being loosened, some are protesting in other ways. Kashmiris have set up their own barricades in this neighborhood to stop armored personnel carriers from entering.
We've put up these blockades so that police won't be able to come here and arrest the youth. They tried a few times, but failed.
The police are trying to come here, but the people are resisting. We've managed to keep them away many times.
Acts of defiance, even as the Indian government says it will take a wait-and-see approach before lifting more of its restrictions in the region. Fez Jamil, Al Jazeera, New Delhi.
See, I, for one, was a little bit anxious because I think Thursday was India's Independence Day. I think things usually kick off in Kashmir, but it seems like everyone's okay for now. But yeah, so solidarity with Hong Kong, solidarity with Kashmir, and of course, solidarity with, which is approaching a year. I think they're at 10, 11 months now. The Yellow Vests in France, which their protest kicked off when their neoliberal government with Macron putting in place a very regressive fuel tax. So everyone got their yellow vests that they are required by law to have in their vehicle in case of an emergency. And this, rightfully so, is an emergency for the French people. So we've got the very brave and well-organised people of very little Hong Kong taking on the mighty, massive China. And then we've got the very resilient and stuck in a shitty situation people of Kashmir, with the governments of Pakistan and India fucking with their shit. And then we've got the very foolish and stubborn French government that seems pretty confident history won't repeat itself. If I was Macron, I would have shat myself when I started seeing guillotines in town squares. Alright, on to the next one. Protests in Sudan actually got rid of their leader. He's a war criminal, and I think he had a couple of decades under his belt of being the president. And yeah, Sudanese took to the streets. I think a few dozen people have died as a result of the violence, and after months of negotiating, the military and opposition signed a power sharing accord to start the transitional government. Alright, I hope you're taking note, Australians. First we have 1 million people, a quarter of the population, protesting because of a bill. I could show you 3 dozen bills by the Australian Parliament that fuck us all over. Then what have we got? People having their connections screwed over. I'm not saying that our NBN is being in between two nuclear armed nations, but still. And then what? Neoliberal regressive tax. That is our government's favourite thing to do. I just explained to my cousin yesterday that, even without a job, you're a taxpayer, because that thing you bought just there, you had to pay GST on it, didn't you? And then there was, war criminal. We had a war criminal. We're ticking all the boxes. Can you see the theme? Alright, last one.
At least one person was killed on Sunday as thousands of protesters denouncing corruption blocked roads and paralyzed much of the Haitian capital of Port-au-Prince. The protesters continue to press home their demand for the removal of President Jovenel Moise.
It's a protest against corruption and impunity. And the reason why we're here today is because of the hypothetical funds we can finally start the trial.
Many stores and petrol stations were closed. Travel between some cities was hampered as protesters blocked roadways with cars, rocks and other large objects.
Like everybody else, he's got to go. He's got to go. He's not running the country properly. Everybody's upset. And you see as many as you can see how many people are on the street today.
Police erected barricades near the presidential palace.
Right on. See? That's what I'm talking about. Yes. Solidarity. Go get him. Everyone. Everywhere. Stand up to the powerful. Don't take their shit. Are you paying attention, Australia? Oh my god. I quite like this video as well. I did just sort of slap it together if that wasn't obvious, but I think it's just another thing that shows no matter where you are and what part of the world you're on, we have a lot of similar issues. We all seem to want similar things and have to fight similar problems. Like, subscribe. See you next time.